Hey, welcome to Teaching Executive Skills with UDL in middle school. I'm Suzanne. I've worked in math and ELA and special education. I've been an instructional coach and administrator and a classroom teacher. But right now, I'm sharing the work of a much larger team that donates their time and energy free of charge to their peers, and we're excited to share our stuff. So, what is executive function and what is UDL? So, let's do a little bit of a deep dive today. So, your executive skills develop until you're age 25, with rapid growth in the middle years. And of course, middle years is what we're all interested in. So, we have to be really careful and we have to be really intentional when we say, oh, our students already know how to do these things. And so, today we're going to use the UDL guidelines, Universal Design for Learning. We're going to use the UDL guidelines to explore how we can scaffold and make strategic, goal-directed, purposeful, and motivated learners. And I am going to give a little bit of a warning here. We don't do UDL. We use UDL as a lens. So think about putting on sunglasses and looking at the world. It tints the way that you see it. And so we don't do UDL. We see through a lens that's using neuroscience to inform what we know about teaching and learning. So we'll talk about that. We're going to provide some classroom level and school-wide evidence-based strategies for teachers, coaches, and administrators to put in place to make sure that we can support our students' executive skills and scaffold the ones that don't develop until age 25. So what do you even do with this video? Great question. I would add it to a coaches meeting. So if you have weekly or monthly coaches meetings, just bring it to that. And then you could also bring it to a leadership meeting or send it out ahead of time so that you can talk about, hey, what role does executive function have in our post-pandemic world? What role are we having right now of our students are struggling with some executive function skills. Our students are struggling with sort of being members of a community or completing tasks. And so I would consider sharing this video with folks in a coaches meeting or a leadership meeting. So who is this video intended for? Definitely admins, definitely coaches, all of us who are department chairs or grade level leads, experienced teachers, but it's not for new teachers and it is not for inexperienced staff who might also be in those roles. This is really a conversation you want to have with your folks once you all feel like, hey, I kind of know what's going on. I've got some experiences and now I want to be able to discuss what to do about it. Not a what to do on Monday. So it's going to help you decide if UDL is the right framework for you. Remember, UDL is a lens, and then instantly connect with colleagues to get what they've already planned. So we've already got some things. We'd love to share them, create a bit of a network. We already have one across the country, and we'd like to connect you to it. But it's not going to give you a new strategy to use on Monday. It's not a quick debrief for your next faculty meeting. So this is a video. So go ahead and just stop and take a screenshot of this. Slide deck is going to be at tinyurl.com, AMLE Executive UDL, or you can use the QR code. First 20 days handout is at tinyurl.com/first 20 days, 20, the number 20, UDL. So tinyurl.com, first 20 days UDL, or you could scan the QR code. All right, so first question that we've got to talk about is, why can't you rent a car until you're age 25? And so some of you are already arguing with me and saying, oh, you can rent it at 21. You just have to pay a fee. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. And some of you didn't know you couldn't rent a car until age 25. But if you're under 25, you would have known. So here's the thing that rental car companies know that we forget about in the middle grades, whether we're teaching 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th or 9th grade. Students do not have a fully developed brain at 14 or 12. But the rental car companies think about those things all the time. So rental car companies are going to look at what's the element of risk in renting a giant machine that can crash or be damaged or scratched or stained. What's the downside of that, of renting it to someone who might be 24 or 21 or 20 or 16 and 3/4? And the answer is most rental car companies are not going to rent to you until you're 25. And if they rent to you at 21, they're going to charge you a fee that is going to cover the risk. And so what all this comes down to is there's a lot of risk involved in assuming that a person is going to be able to consistently do things before age 25. And so when we say do things, there's so much involved in executive function. And so we have these jokes right now about adulting, right? And so we can all think of people in our lives who just aren't that great at adulting. And then we think of ourselves and we say, well, I'm not that great at adulting. It depends on the day. I don't always want to um, wash my car after it's been covered in bugs on a long car trip. I don't always want to put the dishes away after dinner. I just want to lie on the couch. There are things that we just don't want to do. And so the challenge is which things are important and which things aren't that important. And when we're thinking about that, that's exactly what the rental car companies are thinking about because they want to take your money. That it's a business. They want to make a profit, but it's not worth it to them to rent to someone under the age of 25 because the decision making isn't fully matured. And at age 21, it isn't necessarily fully matured either, but they're willing to take a risk if you pay an extra insurance. And so that so much of that is so important for us as we think about how our brains develop because we might look at a 13-year-old who's sitting in front of us and say, well, yesterday you were perfectly fine in doing this, but today you're not doing it. Well, a rental car company would say, yes, that's how they got their license at 17. But at 19 or 23, we don't trust them to always look behind them to back out of a space or to park carefully and not take off a side view mirror because they can't consistently do it. So we have to be cautious. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So what do we mean when we say that UDL is a framework for teaching and learning? So in front of you are the UDL guidelines. This is the UDL 2.0 guidelines, which is a graphic organizer. It looks a little bit different than the 3.0, but it's all the same content. We just prefer the 2.0 for our purposes. So the framework for teaching and learning called UDL is a neuroscience-based framework for approaching reducing barriers to student success. So the idea is you look at your teaching and learning and you make a decision about how do I want to reduce barriers. Not every child is a special snowflake. Not every child needs specially designed instruction, but there are certain themes that we want to make sure where we reduce barriers and we provide scaffolds. And we'll talk about that today. So if you look at the bottom of the UDL guidelines on your screen, the left-hand side is all about the recognition brain network. And that leads to, if you look at the bottom of the column, resourceful, knowledgeable learners. If you're driving, by the way, please don't look at your screen. The middle column is about the strategic brain network. That's where we provide multiple means of action and expression. And if you look at the bottom of the middle column, you'll see strategic goal-directed learners is what we get from that. And then on the right-hand side, all important, that is the affective brain network. And that's where we need to make sure we've got our students engaged and motivated. And if you look at the bottom, that's purposeful, motivated learners. And that's part of adulting. Like our middle grades learners won't necessarily get there while they're in front of us, but it's not that we're not going to keep them on the path. So how do we use the UDL framework to reduce barriers for student learning? Well, what you do is you think about your school and your department and your grade level and your classroom, and you say to yourself, well, where am I running into some challenges? And once you figure out what the challenges are, then you think about how the brain works and what students need to be scaffolded with, because developmentally, sometimes they're learning things, sometimes they need to be scaffolded in things, and then sometimes they're just not able to do it. And so we need to make sure that they have some differentiated opportunities, not differentiated from them, but differentiated of, my students can't build a car right now, but that doesn't mean they can't explore engines. So in the lower right-hand corner, we have an area that we call the cautious corner. So let me go back to show you. So if you see, there's 9 guidelines. And so the lower right-hand corner is formed by 6, 8, and 9. And we're going to focus on that. So 6, 8, and 9 are the areas that focus on executive function. And so the challenges with these are our middle grades learners actually have not gotten to the point where they can master these yet. So I want you to look first at the orange box. It says 5.3. That's a build fluencies with graduated levels of support for practice and performance. So most of us call that gradual release of responsibility, and we call it I do, we do, y'all do, you do. And so that is one of the most important things that we do in middle grades, which is make sure that we model flexible models of skill performance. And then we give students safe opportunities with supports to practice them until they become independent. But if you look at 6, 8, and 9, we have this big red line that's cordoning it off. And the reason for that is we have to be super careful because students on any given day may or may not be able to do what's in 6 and what's in 8. So let's look at 6 first. So that's executive function. Setting your own goals, making sure that you can figure out, hey, what's the best way to do this? How do I keep track of information and my stuff? And how do I know I'm doing this well? And so that sounds amazing. Like we might think, oh, goal setting, like what college do I want to go to? No, let's back this one up. So this is probably a little bit more like, hey, I'm supposed to finish reading this in the next 20 minutes of independent work time. And I'm supposed to annotate it because there's a thing we're going to do afterwards. And my teacher said it and might be written on the board. Okay. So that's determining like, what am I going to do first? Silently read, perhaps. But then planning and strategy development is how will I use my time? I'm going to ask to go to the bathroom right now. I'm going to leave the room. Am I going to use one of my anchor charts in my notebook? And then let's look at 6.3. Do I even know where my notebook is? Did I ever put my anchor chart in there? Have I suddenly lost the sheet of paper I was supposed to be reading from? Now I'm looking around. Did I hand it to someone else because I thought that was helpful and now I don't have one? Have I been using the back pocket organization system where I fold things up, put them in the back pocket of my pants, and then if I wear those again, I will have that paper, and if not, I will not. And then 6.4, monitoring progress. It depends. As a human being, we don't always know how we're doing on something. Sometimes we need feedback from other people. But then there's always the duckling students, right? They follow you around the classroom. Is this right? Is this right? Am I doing this right? So, like, that's a playful way to talk about executive function, but I think some of that will resonate with us. Let's jump up to 8. Sustaining effort and persistence is something that has absolutely consumed much of our time in the last few years. And so, some of the things that we have to think about are, do students understand the meaning of the goals and the learning targets in front of them and see that they're going to lead to something? Are they at that Goldilocks point of not too hard and not too easy, but just right learning, which sometimes they think it's too hard or think it's too easy, but it might be just right with scaffold. So it depends. And then are we fostering collaboration and community? We are definitely facing more students than ever who don't want to work together with other people. They want to work alone or only with people that they're comfortable with. And so something as easy as think pair is actually harder than we would think. And then that mastery-oriented feedback, helping students do what 6.4 said, which is figure out where they are and where they need to be and how we can close that gap. And then keeping them along for the ride, because people will sustain effort and persistence if they feel like they're getting better. That's our autonomy, mastery, and purpose elements of drive. And then we look at 9, and it's just a big adulting mess when we think about our middle grades learners. So self-regulation is super important to us. We definitely want to keep your hands and feet to yourself unless there's a need to use them with someone else. But when you look at 9.1 and you think about expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation, we all know adults, or we felt ourselves, that I don't always have expectations and beliefs that I'll be motivated to do something. Sometimes I feel like I can't do this. And I think that will resonate with many of us. 9.2 is personal coping skills and strategies. I think all of us can say that that's a lifespan skill that we all work on. I don't always have the coping skills that I need. I need a mindset, a growth mindset that will tell me that I will build them over time through trial and error and asking for support and then developing them myself. And then that self-assessment and reflection, that's probably the hardest of all of them. And that's why it's right there at 9.3 of, it's real hard to see yourself accurately and think about what your next steps are. There's so much other self-talk that goes into it. And so that's our cautious corner. It's not just things that are difficult for our middle grades learners, but it's things that are difficult for all of us. So we want to be super cautious when we say, well, they did this yesterday. They were able to follow directions yesterday. They were able to manage their materials yesterday. They were able to monitor their progress yesterday and use a coping strategy. Sure, but the rental car companies would say just because you could do it to get your license doesn't mean you can do it every day. And so we have to remember to scaffold. Cautious corner. So, what do we do? So, there are some classroom level evidence based strategies you can put in place to develop students' executive skills, and they're going to scaffold them until age 25 or earlier. Some students, I mean, everybody's different. Some students are going to be able to do these things at 13 because someone has already taught them to them, and that's great. But we still have to do it for everybody else because that's our job. So, we're going to talk about two different things today. We're going to do a quick talk about first 20 days and strategy instruction, and then another quick talk about Socratic seminar and spiderweb discussion, and then hook you up with some resources so you can continue the conversation if this sounds good to you. So, the first 20 days is simply a way to think about how to launch students into independent use of executive function skills. So, what you have in front of you is 20 days on a calendar, and those 20 days could start on the first day of school or on a Tuesday or on a Friday. It could start in October. It could start the 20 days leading up to winter break. It really doesn't matter when they start. It's simply the first 20 days where you expect a student to start working on something. And the idea behind it is you're going to take strategies. Remember how we talked about gradual release of responsibility? I do, we do, y'all do, you do. So we're going to take strategies, which can also be routines and procedures, and we are going to show students, hey, this is what it is. This is how you're going to do it. We're going to practice together, and then I'm going to expect you to do it. And that's going to make you successful in this environment. Right? So the reason that that's important is when we use gradual release of responsibility and we explicitly teach strategies to students, it's a high leverage practice for students with disabilities. It's an effective practice for English language learners, but it's also how everyone's brain develops. We see something, we apprentice with it, and then we practice it and generalize it until we can do it without thinking. And so, first 20 days is a way to organize the most important routines and strategies in your field, in your content area, in your grade level to make sure that students can do them. Right? And the reason that this matters is it lifts the cognitive load on their working memories. It builds their apprenticeship and it creates expert learners. So that's the first 20 days. So the reason that this works, if you look at 5.3 in the center, is you're building their fluency. You've used graduated levels of support for practice and performance. And then that 6, 8, and 9, the cautious corner, it's scaffolded because each day you're helping with goal setting, you're reminding them of the strategy. You're giving them the information and resources they need to practice it and helping them see their progress. So instead of just saying, hey, y'all know what to do, you've done it once. It's having that gradual release over 20 days to make sure that it becomes a habit. We have to remember that when we're in the cautious corner, some students are going to master things quickly. They'll have it by the end of the first 20 days. Some of them will not master it by the end of the first 20 days, and that's just information for us, which is one of the reasons why we often do the first 20 days at the beginning of the school year, because if I only have my students for a semester, say in a CTE class, or if I have my students for the whole year but every other day, it feels like I don't have a lot of time to circle back with students who might need more scaffolds. So I'm not going to reteach, but I am going to scaffold them until they hit mastery. And I'd like a long window for that. And so we often do that beginning of the year. It also helps with classroom management and expectations. So that's the first strategy to support executive function. The second one, and this will surprise a lot of people, we want to focus on Socratic seminar, but we're going to choose spiderweb discussion as the example. So we're not going to talk about fishbowl. That's not one of the ones that applies here. And what we want to say is a lot of you have heard of Socratic seminar and say, oh, that's for advanced students, or that's not for me, or it doesn't fit my content area. But I want you to think differently about this and think of it as a community building motivator and attendance intervention. Many of us are dealing with attendance challenges, And our students don't always come to school because sometimes they don't think anyone would miss them. And they think that if they were there, this wouldn't be a thing that they would master. And so I want you to think differently and have Socratic seminar, or in this case, spiderweb discussion, be something that you add to your toolkit that would support executive function and potentially be an attendance intervention. You could write it in the school improvement plan. So, what's in front of you right now is a reminder that when you do something like a discussion, you wouldn't just have a discussion. You actually would teach students how to get ready for it. And so the day before or class period before you'd have a discussion or a seminar, you would give them some sort of scaffolded notes form so that they could write their question and their answer. In this particular one, it's written for an ELA class. It could be anywhere between 5th and 9th or 10th grade. And students could write there question, a think and search question, and an author and me question, or maybe an on my own. And that would support inference, which is a tough area for all of us. So that's both a big focus for ELA and it's the scaffold for executive function. So that's first, which is sometimes we have to think differently about how we use these strategies. The Teachers Pay Teachers download that might lead to Socratic seminar might not have this. So we might just have to make sure that everybody knows, hey, we're going to do some discussions and seminars, and I want you to make sure students write their questions in advance. And another one, and the reason we're talking about spiderweb instead of just Socratic seminar, though there's nothing wrong with that, lots of good materials from Avid if you look online, you can search YouTube for Alexis Wiggins' spiderweb discussion. So Alexis Wiggins, heir to the throne for the UBD fame, is also the writer of The Best Class You Never Taught, a fantastic book if you haven't read it. She talks about spiderweb discussion, and possibly the most important thing from it is it's a way to make visual students' participation in class. And so she's got a great discussion of this online. The book is fantastic, and the materials are all available through the National Writing Project. And I put tinyurl.com/NWPUDL. You can see those things as well. And we've used this in class. It's great. Students can then see after a discussion how often they participated and whether they included everyone. And so that's a nice community builder. And then that gives students a baseline so that they can see, hey, I need to include more people, or hey, I did a great job participating today. And that builds some of their executive function because it's a way to make visual their participation, and that helps with progress monitoring. So let's take a look at that again. When we think about how the UDL framework reduces barriers for student learning, in that center column, I want to build a strategic goal-directed learner. But I've got shy students and disconnected and disenfranchised students. I've got struggling learners who believe that they're not going to participate in a discussion because they're not the talkers in class. I need to help them monitor their own progress and manage information and resources and set a goal for themselves. And so if I have the spiderweb discussion and if I have them write their questions in advance, many times I will be able to, through a little bit of practice, 5.3, gradual release of responsibility, get students to tell me that the discussion was the thing they're most proud of. 6.4, they can monitor their progress. They know they, 6.3, use their information and resources. And I want to jump up to 8. It fosters collaboration and community, and they got mastery-oriented feedback. It's a different way for us to think about 9. Self-regulation, because now I've built in my students expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation. They've used some personal coping skills and strategies to participate and overcome some things that maybe they thought they couldn't do. They change their identity as a learner, which is a recursive process that also helps with their executive skills because it reinforces it, and it helps them develop self-assessment and reflection. That's how you get a purposeful, motivated learner that comes to school every day. And so it's very simplistic to think about the first 20 days and spiderweb discussion as 2 focus areas, but they're doable. They're attendance interventions. They help students. They're high leverage practices, which helps our special education students. They're grounded in research, which helps our English language learners. And what we want you to know is we're all in this together. It's not till age 25 that the commercial industry rental car companies trusts that people can do things consistently. As middle grades educators, our students are very inconsistent. They might be able to do something at 9 in the morning that they can't do at 1 in the afternoon. And we know that, and it's normal and it's fine. But we have to make sure we have a set of scaffolds that gets them through it. So here are some things to get started if you decide that this is a path you want to take. This is how to plan the first 20 days. We have a handout. This is how to increase student motivation by scaffolding working memory. It's a video. And there's so much more. So we want to invite you to join the National Writing Project's Right Now Teacher Studio. Go ahead and join. It doesn't cost anything. You can lurk. You can participate. There's a QR code right there, or you can use the tinyurl.com and WPUDL, and the materials are there, and you can connect with us. So what do you do now? So you should chat with some other leaders in your school and plan which strategies you can put in place to develop students' executive skills. And we've got to scaffold the ones that won't develop until age 25. Of course, we all know some adults past age 25 who still need scaffolds, which is fine. That's what learner variability is. We've got a book about this. If you'd like to read more about the first 20 days, some specifics on Socratic seminar and spiderweb discussion. We also have math tasks and some collaborative learning techniques in there as well. And the teachers and coaches in that book are always happy to provide professional development to teacher leaders and admins, and they don't charge a fee because we're all in this together. Just reach out to us and we'd like to collaborate. Thank you so much for hanging with us for a little while.